From the earliest days of our country, we had a post office. There are references in the Constitution to post roads. I believe we had the post office before we had the Constitution. But throughout our history, until recently, when this particular individual got to be Postmaster General, it was understood that postal service was a public good. In a democracy, it was important for citizens to be able to communicate with them. The purpose of the post office was not to make money for the United States government. The purpose of the post office was to provide mail service to every citizen in the United States. And that service was provided at the same price. You could mail a letter across the street or across the country, and it was the same price because there was a public good in having service to everyone. And we did not decide that someone was too expensive, so they just wouldn't get any postal service because they weren't really true citizens like the rest of us. I don't know that they use the term universal service, but that's what it was. Then electricity was developed. And we had a lot of for-profit companies who were very interested in selling electricity in urban areas. They were not so interested in selling electricity in rural areas, and they certainly weren't interested in running an electric wire down to the last house at the end of the last road. And we sat here and we didn't have it, and then because of the New Deal, because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, we got electric power associations. And they provided service to the end of the line, to the end of the road, because that was their duty, that was their goal, that was their mission, to provide electricity. They were not trying to make a profit. They were not worried about their quarterly earnings. They were not worried about the price of their stock on Wall Street. They were not worried about how much money they could possibly dream up to pay their executives. They were worried about getting electricity out to the end of the line, as it was with telephones. We had certificated areas, we had telephones, and once again we had universal service, and if you had a franchise for an area, for a telephone company, you had to get service to everybody in that area. Then the internet came along. Then we had broadband. And suddenly we lost interest in universal service. And the big boys explained to us that we just didn't understand economics. We may be the wealthiest country in the world, but surely you can't expect the United States to guarantee broadband to everybody. Ha ha ha! That's just not feasible. And of course, just between us big boys, those folks out in the sticks at the end of the road, well, you know how it is. The people of rural America have had enough. The reason we're getting service to everyone now is because the electric power associations set up subsidiaries whose goal it was to get service to the end of the line. And the United States government decided that was important. And so we started getting service. Mighty cheap service, gigabyte service. And if you can imagine such a thing, if you're getting your broadband from your public utility, I want you to think with me about this now. and you have a question or a problem, you know what you can do? You can call them on the phone. And believe it or not, someone will answer that phone. Someone right there in your home county. You're not on hold forever. You don't have to listen to recordings for hour after hour after hour telling you how great this telephone company is, as is the case with some entities. So I want to talk to you about Wren, Mississippi. Wren is in the northwestern part of Monroe County. They get their electricity from Okolona. When the areas were being certificated years ago, 3 municipalities, Okolona, New Albany, and Holly Springs, had certificated areas in the rural part of the counties and nearby counties. Much like an EPA, except that it was connected with the municipal utilities. So as a result, although people who are served by EPAs are getting power, getting broadband, if you're in one of these areas in Wren, out between Amory and Okolona, or out from New Albany, or out from Holly Springs, you're not served by EPA, and you don't have a subsidiary of an EPA trying to get you broadband. So what you have is overpriced and undergood. Think about what it's like when your cable goes out. Your broadband is down. What an inconvenience that is. But for folks at Wren, in a meaningful sense, the cable's never up. The broadband never works because they're too far out. And there are laws on the books that this legislature has passed which prohibit Okolona and New Albany and Holly Springs from providing broadband service out there. So if you're in Wren, you may well be in the Amory school system. If not, you're probably in the Nettleton or Okolona school districts. But when you need it for your kids to be able to obtain the instruction that was being provided online, that wasn't really feasible at your house. All they wanted was simply to remove the legal prohibition, which is in state law, which prohibits the city of Okolona, the city of New Albany, and the city of Holly Springs from doing the same thing EPAs are doing. And people in Wren are watching everybody else get broadband, and they say, what have we done wrong? They want to know why they can't have broadband like people just down the road can. They don't understand. I don't understand. And there's always some big fancy thing that's going to happen in some day, some way, somehow. Yes, it's going to happen, and this will happen, and that will happen, and day after day after day after day after day goes by, and they ain't got no broadband. But I'll tell you what is going on. The big boys ain't missed a dividend. The big employees in the big fancy offices ain't missed a paycheck. And missed a bonus. They're all doing right well. I don't think those folks spend a lot of time worrying about the folks at Wren. But I just don't understand why it is we can't figure out some way to let the people in Northeast Monroe County, in the Amory School District, Nettleton School District, and the Okolona School District, that get their electricity from Okolona, participate in broadband. Almost every industrialized country is a matter of policy as universal broadband for everyone. I think it's 2022. And there's no broadband in Wren.
Thank you, Senator Bryan. Senator Carr, you're recognized for close.
I certainly share his frustrations, but the reason why the MON language was taken out, because there's actually a company that's entered into an MOU to provide service in New Albany, which is one of the 3 cities that are lacking access. So we wanted to sit on it 80 years, see how this grant program works. And we're talking about $162 million in different buckets that are going to be used for multiple areas of the state. So we want to see how this grant program works before we enter into the municipal-owned networks. If services are provided in those areas, we're going to revisit that conversation next year.